for coming, especially in these trying times. Thank you for coming out. I hate to start on such a mundane note, but if you haven't signed in and you want to get our Sterling Water Stewards newsletters, they come out by email, you got to give us your email address, so please be sure to do that. And we also have a phone tree. We'll call you and let you know about important meetings coming up. So if you want to get those phone calls from us and you're not, please be sure we have your name and your phone number. So these folks are manning the sign-in tables. Also, look in your junk mail, because the bulk email goes into junk mail with a lot of people's programs. So look and see if you're already signed up with us and you're not getting the emails. info@sterlingwaterstewards.org has to be enabled to go into inboxes. And I think it's bouncing into a lot of people's junk mail. So that's that. Why are we here tonight? As you know, this fall's town board elections are going to be really, really important. Only the town board has the power to pass stronger laws protecting our water. And this is both our private and our public water supplies here. The town's existing laws governing commercial bulk water extraction, we believe, are not strong enough to protect us from deep pockets investors who want to profit from the pure spring water in Sterling. Sterling Water Stewards wants to tighten the existing permit law, and we also want to create a source water protection zone around the public wells that absolutely prohibits new commercial bulk water extraction or any projects that could threaten groundwater contamination. So this is what we're calling for. And we need to get this done before the one-year moratorium is lifted. We're expecting the one-year moratorium will go into effect next week probably. There's going to be another public hearing Tuesday. And so we've got about a year, and we've got to get stuff done. So we've asked the candidates to tell us where they stand on water issues. Each candidate's going to have up to 10 minutes to state their platform. We ask you to listen respectfully. When we've heard from all the candidates, we'll open the floor to questions, and please help us maintain a civil discourse by continuing to be respectful. So we're just going to have them one at a time, and I'm just going to briefly introduce them. First up is Joan Kelly, who's a lifetime resident of the town of Sterling, and she has over 30 years of experience serving the town of Sterling residents in several capacities. She started in 1989 on a zoning commission. She served on the town board 1994 to 2000 and in 2018. She served as town supervisor 2001 to 2009, and then in 2020 filling out the term of June Smith when she resigned mid-year. She's currently on the zoning commission. She's currently the deputy supervisor, and she is running for a town council seat this fall. Her number one reason for running for the town board council seat is, quote, to help protect our drinking water for quality and quantity. So, Joan?
Okay, first of all, I want to thank the Sterling Water Stewards for putting this venue together. And I also want to say it's exciting for me to see the number of people that want and recognize the importance of protecting our water. Karen explained about my background. Some of you have actually worked with me in some capacity. If I may say, Chris Palermo, I remember when you were a town board member. But anyway, so obviously what I have going for me is a lot of familiarity with the town of Sterling's local government. In fact, the current comprehensive plan that's in place is the joint comprehensive plan with the Village of Fairhaven and the town of Sterling, and I served on that committee as the chair, working with Mayor McVeigh to put a comprehensive plan in place. The purpose of the comprehensive plan is to explain where we are at the present, where we've been, the history, and most importantly for me, where we want to be with goals and objectives. Then we have our land use regulations that are the tools that allow us to head for those goals, those objectives. And as Karen mentioned, she mentioned there is an activity. Well, let me give you some background there. So I was on the zoning commission back in 2014, 15, 16, when we worked, Town of Sterling worked with Stephen Winkley, who is the hydrogeologist. He, in my opinion, he's the specialist about water. Coincidentally, he's now working, or maybe not coincidentally, but it's fortunate that he's now working with the village of Fairhaven as trying to get data, collect information, and hopefully get some reports about our current water status. By the way, Stephen Winkley, if you were to look at Activity 51 in our chart, in our land use regulation on bulk water extraction, and the article that goes along with that, and an overlay, district overlay, it was Stephen Winkley who gave us that recommendation, and the town put it in place. So that's a reflection of what he helped us do at the time, based on the information that he has. Now, that said, the town of Sterling is actually in the process of looking at drilling well number 3 on the property. There's well 1, 2, well 2, but looking at doing well 3, which means going through the DEC regulations to demonstrate that the town of Sterling can get a permit for that. Is that my timer? Anyway, so the timing is perfect to collect current information. And going back to my role in this, and I'm going to call it the way I see it. So I was, as Karen said, I was the town supervisor, a temporary appointment last year from July through December. And at the December 21st meeting, which I chaired at the town highway garage as town supervisor, our attorney had recommended that the town do a short-term moratorium on bulk water extraction for sale. I couldn't get one of the board members to make a motion to pass this resolution. In fact, we didn't even discuss it, other than one of the board members said in public, we have enough regulations in place, we don't have to worry about the water, besides we don't want to discourage business. I went home and I said to Paul Kelly, my husband, Paul, I'm going to have to run for town board. We've got to have people who recognize the importance of that water and to protect that water. That has to be first and foremost. New York State DEC, Department of Health, and a couple of other agencies recognize that and have collaborated and created a process for municipalities, communities to go through to put a plan in place. So anyway, I think the stars are aligned. Obviously, it's very important to me that we protect the quality and the quantity of the water. I'm not a hydrogeologist. I don't know what the parameters are. I don't know that. I assume it's a finite amount of water until someone proves otherwise. So that said, I would ask for your support. I'm running for town board, town council, and we'll be on the November ballot for that. I know, you've got questions now, but I'm thinking, okay, how do I get through, make sure there's nothing else I wanted to, how could I forget this? I'm 1/5 of the legislative body if I'm on the town board, okay? And that's important to know. So I can go in there and have the best intentions, but it has to be the majority that see the significance of protecting this aquifer, this water supply. I also, in the bigger picture, I think it's important that we promote open and transparent local government. That's always been very important to me. I'm not excited about boards that go behind closed doors without good cause, without legal reasons. So that's something else I would support for the bigger picture. Bottom line, in my opinion, I believe the best thing, I'm on the zoning commission right now, which means that the purpose of the zoning commission is we're advisory. I've got 2 planning board members and myself, and we're the ones that make recommendations to amend the land use regulations. So my recommendation right now would be that we have an overlay district with prohibited, restricted, or limited uses and/or activities in that area. And I heard Karen speak before about our special permit process. And I would think that it would be logical that the zoning commission look at that process, and with input from the planning board, to see if we can shore that up, if there's a way to do that. That said, it's really the town board that has the authority to make those changes to the land use regulations. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Joan. So we're having Charlie go next because we're letting the veterans of public speaking. Didn't you hear me say that before?
No, I didn't.
Not a veteran. Well, Charlie is running unopposed for his seat. So he came on the board this year.
Right, March.
Yeah, and is already on the town board, but is running in the fall election. Charlie has lived in this area for most of his life. He's currently living on Old State Road in Sterling with his wife of almost 40 years. He's got 3 grown boys and 9 grandchildren that all live a few miles away. So he wants us to know, I told everybody, just tell me how you want me to introduce you. So I guess he wants you to know he's got deep roots in our community. Charlie.
All right. Thank you. Like she said, we've lived in this area most of our lives. In fact, I caught my first, I don't know how many fishermen we have out there, but I caught my first walleye, and they're not real abundant so much in this area back then. But when I was about 6 years old, my brother took me under the bridge on Old State Road, and I caught my first walleye. About that big, still my first. One of the reasons I got on the board was because now I have grandchildren. I grew up in this area. What a beautiful area. We have people that drive from all over the area to visit us, take part in what we have to offer, and it's a beautiful thing. Mostly my grandkids. They've caught a lot of their first fish out of that same creek I caught my first fish. I'd like to preserve that, keep that for hopefully their kids and their kids beyond that. But more on a relative note, I joined the board as well and got violently shoved in, like I say, I've been on since March, into this water project. But that's how I've done most of my working career, is be thrown in it and figure it out as you go. It doesn't sound very good, but it's what I've had to do. And I know a lot more now about water than I ever thought I'd know in my life, where it comes from, and all the different soils and types. Now, I studied agronomy in school. You know quite a bit about soils and different clays and sandy loams and stuff, but that's mainly for farming. Water's a whole other deal. I never realized what we're actually walking on would probably scare you if you could see through the ground and see what's going on down there. But I did hear some of the rumors flying around town that there's endless amounts of water and we don't have to worry about it. Well, the more I delved into it and found out that that may not be necessarily true. So at the utmost, we have to protect what we have until we can figure out exactly what's going on. We can't be making decisions on, well, so-and-so Bob said back 42 years ago, that, you know, there's some oil to it, but the fact is, I really don't think at this point we know exactly what we have. And to go to other meetings and hear what some of us have all heard, that all, you know, there's endless amount of water in there, don't worry about it. Or on the other spectrum, hey, it's gonna run out, we don't know when. So, as part of my commitment to the people of Sterling, to my family, is help figure that out and get that problem solved. There's been a couple attempts to do what this new guy wants to do already in the past, in the same vicinity. So I feel like we're kind of reinventing the wheel again. So I want to take it personally and get to the bottom of it to say this is probably what we should do. And it's not going to be me figuring that out. And surround myself with smart people that know that kind of stuff. And we are working with Mr. Winkley along with the folks here in the village. I've been the point person to make contact with and lead with them. The town is planning on, within the next, I'm gonna say 2 to 3 months, doing that test well. We've already talked to someone to prepare the land so we can do the test well, and tests will be performed under the guidance of DEC, Department of Health, and also Stephen Winkley, and any other agencies around. And they're gonna go to the surrounding well areas and do it like a 3-day drawdown test to verify what wells will be affected, what the aquifer is capable of doing. Hopefully we will determine that, and hopefully the life of that aquifer going forward and what we can expect to tap out of that. The big gain that we hope on all these tests, we'll be able to identify that overlay area more scientifically than guesstimation. That's the goal. And I too want to make sure that everybody's aware of what's going on and be very transparent. 100% agree with Joan. We're all taxpayers here. We all love this town. We all should have the right to know what's going on in it. That's why we were elected to help guide the town in that way. And, you know, as far as listen to the people, I forget what gentleman said that at one of my first meetings. He said, just listen to the people. And I always have, and I haven't been steered wrong yet. So I appreciate your continued support in the future. And if you can answer any questions, I'll do the best I can. I'm not going to give you answers to things I don't know, obviously, but the things that I can help you with, I'm here to help. Thank you.
Is a 30-year resident of the town of Sterling, and she's been employed by the Red Creek School District for 33 years. Having raised her family here, she sees the importance of ensuring a viable, safe, and prosperous town for future generations. Michelle?
Thank you. I have no cards. I teach my kids use no cards. I am Michelle McIntyre, and I have to admit that after teaching summer school this very hot summer on a second floor unair-conditioned school to a less than enthusiastic crowd, it's nice to see people choosing to be here to listen to me. I'm not used to that. So a little bit about me. I have been employed by the Red Creek School District for 34 years. During that time, I have been cheerleading coach, I've been class advisor, club advisor, student council advisor. My husband, Tim, also very involved in the school. We've been involved with youth sports, him with school soccer. 3 of our 5 children chose to enter the military. We have 1 active duty Marine right now, and our baby married a U.S. Marine. So our family's kind of all about service, and as I think about retiring this next year, serving the town on town council seems like a pretty easy transition and something that would be well worth my time. The town and the village just seems really to need leaders who are going to listen and communicate and who are actually willing to stand up for the needs of the constituents. Going to some of the town board meetings, I'm not sure that people are trying to hide anything, but just the way things are set up, it seems like things are pretty quiet and you can't really hear. People don't really know what's going on. People aren't feeling like they're hearing what's going on, and I just think with a few little tweaks and better communication, both both during the meetings and even before and after, maybe, via the internet or some place where people can actually go. I don't think there's a well set up method to communicate things. I know things go in the shopper, sometimes, but I talk to a lot of people who don't really get those messages. So I think there are better ways to do things and just really form a team, because that's what the town needs right now. The town and the village, they need to be a team. And I like to be part of a team. I like to learn, I like to communicate, and I'm pretty good at being persistent. If you put me on a task, I'm gonna go figure out what it is that you need. So I first really considered running for this during the COVID pandemic, when many of our kids were home being taught via computer, and we don't have very good computer connections in this area. And we had a lot of students who weren't able to attend classes via the computer. And we had to advocate for them, and we had to try and get many different kinds of hotspots to try and help them. And I thought, in this day and age, we really need something better than that. So I thought, I'm gonna start going to town board meetings and see if there are grants. Let's see what's out there. And that's when I started learning about the water situation, by actually attending some of those meetings. So, that's really kind of why we're here tonight. So, as hydrologists, I looked up this quote, as Luna Leopold said, "Water is the most critical resource of our lifetime and our children's lifetime, and the health of our waters is the principal measure of how we live on the land." So if we don't take care of that now, our kids are going to have problems, our grandkids are going to have problems, and that's what we really are here to talk about. It's a current issue. How can we protect this critical resource? I'm learning. I'm glad to hear Charlie say I really didn't know much about it until I was there. I've been perusing your website, which is really easy to navigate, great sources, great information. If you haven't really looked at it, it's a phenomenal place to go and learn. I've learned a lot doing that. And it's interesting, and it's crucial. The special use permits are given way too easily. The moratorium's a step in the right direction, but as it was stated, you've got to get moving during that moratorium. We already want to try another well there, and then if you want to draw more from that and what happens in the future, people have so many questions. You never know what's going to happen in the future, or if somebody else buys a parcel of land, what's going to happen. One thing I read trying to get ready for this was that I think it was talking about the Dollar General. Some were proposing a Dollar General. So maybe that seems like a really great idea. But the interesting fact that I took away is you put more buildings with roofs and you put more pavement in a drawdown area, and it's not going to recharge the well, and that's a problem. So there's a whole lot of thought that needs to go into this, and I've never even really considered or knew was a thing. So there's a lot of research to do out there. The zoning protections, I know that's been brought out by many people. We need more zoning, but now they're talking about overlay zones for the future, that they can be a little more specific, and that could protect from these types of things. Contamination, our ground is very permeable. We don't want chemicals or septic systems leaking into what really is really good water around here. Okay, that aquifer, my husband's business used to lay on the land that's in question with this water bottling plant possibly going there. That is phenomenal water there, but you don't want to ruin it. So, I guess I kind of chit-chatted my way through that one. Okay, I tend to do that. So you somebody else already talked about Mr. Winkling's findings and how those reports are really important, but you don't even know how long it's going to take to get those reports written and the findings. So it is important that your town government works for you and protects you now. It's important that they learn everything they can, that they use the agencies they can, that they take the information, and that they work for the people. That's what it's there for. So the issue's been illuminated, but what's needed? What I think is needed is a different presentation of the town board. We all agree we have one chance to get this right. If you want to address it, do it well now. Really delve into it, really look for protections for the future. And how does that happen? It happens by electing people to the board who are open-minded, who are willing to research, to ensure that things are done well, who are able to communicate, who are willing to communicate, and present your concerns and findings to the town board. That's another missing element. Those meetings, they just need to be more constituent friendly. Like I said, being there, I'm not sure. I hear people saying we can't even hear what they're saying. Why is it secretive? I'm not even sure it's secretive. It's just not well set up. Right? It just needs to be a different presentation. So the concern with our water is the most important on the docket now, but there are other things that are going to arise. There are other needs that are going to come to the surface, and a trustworthy line of communication is needed no matter what the issue is. That's why I'm running for the town board. I want to be your voice for any and all issues. Let me leave you with a quote from a Native American storyteller, Autumn Morningstar. When life places stones in your path, be the water. A persistent drop of water will wear away even the hardest stone. Water's vital and tough, like your board members should be. They should work for you. Thank you.
Karen Thompson. So Karen Thompson is running under the independent party line, and she's also on the Democrat party line, and she is endorsed by PAPOW, which is an acronym for Preserve and Protect Our Water. The rumors of a threat to Fairhaven and Sterling's drinking water was the catalyst for her to run for office.
Thank you. Thank you, Karen, again for having us here, and thank you everyone for showing up. So I was lucky enough to grow up to visit here as a child. My vacations were here, and as I look back, most of my memories had to deal with water. Going swimming in the lake, going to the west side, and finding the creek on my grandparents' property, getting little bits of fishing line and going fishing there, because I'm pretty sure we all fish here. And now I'm lucky enough to live at that house. I got to live in my grandparents' house in Sterling on Old State Road, and I'm so happy to live there. I am married to my husband, and we have 2 boys, and I love being part of this community. I have done many projects, Mayfest, been involved with Winterfest, Pirate Fest, and have co-headed Club Fortitude, which was an extracurricular 21st Century Grant approved school program, and I just think it's organically changing for me to serve the community into serving as the board. So as Karen had said, that the threat of our water being taken away was the reason why maybe I should be on the board. This is my first time running for any office. I'm not a politician. I'm a massage therapist and I work at Turtle Cove. I talk to a lot of people every day, and I try to listen to them, and I try and listen to what they want. And it seems like a lot of people want to keep their water that they're drinking in this community. I don't believe it's a political issue to keep our water. It's a community issue. This is not something that is a party line. I think, as Joan had mentioned, according to the Sterling and Fairhaven Comprehensive Plan, the residents do want our area to grow in the small, quaint Fairhaven, Sterling way that we are. But to do that, we need water. We need water to accommodate our residents. We need water to accommodate our businesses. And if we don't have that, then we can't grow. Neighboring municipalities with confined aquifers, such as ours, have restrictive laws regarding their water, and their communities are growing. This is not an unheard of thing that most of you are asking for. We need to be able to protect our water, and we can do it. We need to incorporate the data, the past and the present, when we work with the DEC when the third well is drilled. Having a source water protection zone is not unheard of. Many, many other places have done it. And working with Fairhaven, we can have a transparent communication with decisions being made about the water that we have. And when we take care of our water and we conserve this resource, we are actually doing a service to our community fiscally, due to the fact that we won't have to buy water from another source. We won't. We are so lucky to be able to be living on top of our clean source of water. So we need to be able to protect that. We need to be proactive, not reactive. And right now, during this time that we have the moratorium, which is a first step, is it too late to be proactive? Let's just keep going, okay? In California, where I just recently visited, there's a cap on water usage. You actually get fined if you use too much water. Many of you know that, some of you don't. There's restrictions on when you can water your own garden. I don't want that to happen to Sterling. I think that we should be able to conserve and protect our water. Thank you very much.
But it's not about my opinion, it's about all yours. So we're ready to open the floor to questions. Don't be shy. Yes, Heidi?
Yes, I was going to ask every candidate this question, but I think in the purpose of time saving, because I'm sure others will have questions, I'm hoping. I'm going to direct this initially to candidate McIntyre. And as you may know, maybe you don't know, a first ever national water shortage was declared earlier this week for Lake Mead. The shortage is due to the increased demand for the water due to growth and also for our farmlands. This is affecting our major farm belt. The one problem with this is that it is going to affect us as well, because our food service, our food supply is going to be harmed. They are going to be cutting back on the water starting next year for all industry and all agriculture. And later on, it's going to be going to the residentials. Let's not get to that point. Using this situation at Lake Mead as our Marion Corma, if elected, candidate McIntyre, how would you save our water, our quality, our quantity, so that we're not being put in the position that they are out west?
Well, I think some of that is still unknown, and I think part of that is the testing that's going to be done to see what we actually have, but then by instilling, I've got to look for what the term is, was it overlay? Is that the right term? the overlay zones, that would protect both quantity and what goes into the ground. What's able to go into the ground in the area of the recharge, would be vital there, I would think. But you'd have to have the statistics first, and then prior to anything drastic, I think you have to have those laws in place, the zoning laws or the overlay laws that would kind of limit those bulk extractions that aren't happening now, that would protect it from happening in the future, as well as the kinds of chemicals or the uses of the land in that recharge area. And I think that's really the first place that we would have to start.
I guess I'm gonna have to ask everybody this question. Would everybody like to take a shot at this?
Sure. Take a shot at it. I think one of the first and foremost things is, as Michelle mentioned, is number one, we need to protect what we have, make sure nothing happens to that, for sure. And number two, make sure nothing's gonna happen in the future. But one thing I think we really should probably get after, and I don't know if there's been a whole lot of focus on this, would be leak surveys. I've heard several people around the village saying they've had leaks in their yard for months and months, watching hundreds of gallons of water just run down to the bay. You know, I think we need to look at that project real hard because, you know, we're pumping that water and we're just pumping it on the ground. We're not getting it to the people's homes and we're not conserving what we have. We need to make sure when we have a water system in place, we have the means to maintain it, the equipment to maintain it, and ensuring when these lines are being installed, that they're being watched closely and make sure there's no shortcuts and no, for lack of better terms, half-flooded ways of doing it. This is a very serious business, and you could be losing thousands of gallons a day and you won't know it unless you walk by one of the catch basins or one of the town drains or anything. That's how just some of the ones have been caught. But again, protect what we have, figure out what we have, and maintain what we have would be a good place to start.
I agree with Charlie, really, because as I said before, I really think because of my involvement with working with the land use regulations, I think an overlay district makes the most sense. As far as how large it is, I don't know. That's the experts give guidance on that, so we can factor in the recharge area, the wells, etc., and then protect it for quantity, which the bulk water extraction, but quality. And as Michelle referenced, the Dollar General, which they have not formally applied to develop a Dollar General on the Huntress property, the property we're talking about that's adjacent to the village well supply. But the information has been shared with the Town of Sterling Planning Board. And I know the Planning Board has verbalized its concerns about it with the potential for contamination. In other words, it's not just about quantity. We need to protect the quality. Again, the overlay district, in my opinion. And then in the meanwhile, look at the special permit process. I heard someone say it's easy to get a special permit, if I may. Because I attend, if you know me at all, I attend almost all the town board meetings. Even if I'm not on the town board, I'm at the town board meetings. I go to the planning board meetings in the audience, and occasionally the zoning board of appeals meetings. I love to see our local government in action. And so that got my attention when you mentioned that it seems like an easy process, because I've watched this veteran, mature planning board go through the process, and it's very tedious, line by line by line, so I'm right. But I also understand Karen's concern with some of the issues that the stewards have about potential issues with the verbiage in the permit process.
If I can,
Yeah.
I promised I would do this, but our issue is we don't think it's gonna stand up on appeal. That if a permit is denied, that a wealthy person with unlimited means could take it to court and probably win, because the special use permit law is a little vague. You have to prove that you're not gonna harm something. And proving a negative is very difficult in court. So it's gonna be, we say, you say, and so that's why we think there's no guarantees against somebody with deep pockets who wants to sue. But we would much rather see him seek a variance, a zoning variance, which is what this overlay is. And then if he wants to sue for that, God help us, but it's a tougher lawsuit. So I'm sorry, but I want to clarify what our.
Thank you for
belief is.
clarifying that.
It's not that we think they're just gonna rubber stamp or to say it easy, it's that it's not a struggle.
Can we change that law?
This is why we want
The town board has the authority to change the law. Not the planning board, not the zoning board of appeals, not the zoning commission, the town board. It's a 5-member board. The supervisor is 1/5 of that board. I don't know if all people realize that. So there are 4 board seats or council seats, and the supervisor is 1/5 of that board. And the supervisor has no more, no less, of power or authority as a board member, council member. Did I answer your question, Heidi?
Well, I'll have a follow-up because I need some clarity.
Okay.
Okay, I have to really say, yes, I agree with a lot of what was just said. And to piggyback on that, I believe the zoning commission had recommended, and maybe you can clarify exactly that, that the board add to this upcoming moratorium to have industrial and commercial use, pause. Regarding not just the Dollar General, but in any big construction until we put the source overlay protection plan through. And that was not, I think I asked a question, maybe not last one, but the one before, where they could put a second moratorium in place after the one that will hopefully be voted on and approved on the 24th. But we need to work vigilantly and with the DEC and all the other agencies to make sure that our water is taken care of now and in the future.
As a follow-up, I'm gonna ad-lib this one. I called the DOH months ago and had a concern regarding activities on the recharge area. I was directed to ag markets, I never got through, so here I am now. Would the board be willing, if all of you were elected, or most of you were elected, to proceed in possibly doing an overlay zone for this area, which would actually isolate that area from any development whatsoever, for the sole purpose of maintaining the quality and quantity of our water?
I, for one, absolutely would, yes. But I'm gonna let the geologist and the people that know this region area and what the suggestions would be, and listen very closely to them. But yeah, I am very much on board with making sure that our water is not polluted in
To
any
the
shape or
extent where
form.
we could actually restrict any activities on that particular zone only, would we do that?
I'm not sure if it came up and it was legal to do, I would.
Would you follow through and try to find that out?
I would. I will.
Okay. Joan?
As far as I know, that yes, we would have the power to create an overlay and restrict or prohibit certain land uses, activities. I don't know about, if I'd say all, that's quite a broad term, but I would say.
The reason why, I'm not to interrupt, but the reason why I was actually going to ag markets was because if we're gonna have agriculture, we're gonna have problems with phosphates and all the rest of it that normally go through with fertilizing and abating bugs and whatnot. But anyway, fungicides. But the thing that I was concerned about was if we were legally able, if the board was legally able to go to the state and say, this is our sole water our sole water supply. And we do not want any activity whatsoever that could possibly harm that as far as quality and quantity. Would that be a goal that you could possibly put on your list?
I would certainly look at that, but once you say egg market, boy, the
I know,
farmers
I
have
know.
a lot of rights in New York State.
I know.
So I would be cautious about saying that, but certainly I know that we have the authority to create the overlay district and to prohibit and limit certain activities or uses, which I'm a proponent of that. I think that's going to be the answer. But like Charlie said, I would be looking for the information from the experts, the resources that, and the data that's collected, Heidi.
I'm just looking for the long range.
Right.
So,
Right.
Michelle?
Okay, and I would say I'm probably more on the page with Joan right now, saying any and all is kind of all encompassing. When I was reading about the town of Rose and how they did their overlay district, they actually had like, I believe like 3 separate sections, and the restrictions they have on those are different depending on how far out they go and what already exists there. I think you would probably have trouble telling people who live there now and do something that they can't anymore. I think it would be a problem. Now, if it's in the immediate well area, and I think that's what they had called Zone 1, you know, then there is nothing allowed in that area. But as you went further out, they looked at every case individually to see what they use. Maybe you can regulate what kinds of pesticides or what goes into the ground, but it was looked at very individually because there are already established lifelong residents there as well, and you need to make it work for everybody.
All right, can you clarify for me, because that's what I thought you were talking about, was the direct influence of the water source, as far as saying nothing can be done in that circle. Now, obviously,
Exactly.
farmers
Over
are
the
gonna farm.
recharge. Well, as Rose has done, where they have a
Right.
degree of zones.
Absolutely, but I'm talking about the immediate vicinity that will affect the well. We can't do anything to it.
Well, considering the topography, we've got a bowl. It
Right.
comes down all the slopes, it comes down no matter which way. We've got north, south, all of directions. So that
Absolutely.
if we have a very permeable recharge area,
Yep.
all of those activities on what the actual data shows as far as our zone of influence. To
Current,
ensure that that particular activity, AIM activities are going to be specifically regulated for the balance of our
right.
safety.
So currently, the DEC is monitoring those farms around there, what they're spraying, and, you know, there's supposed to be a regulation and guidance. Now,
Supposedly.
I'm a farmer at heart. I don't farm anymore, but I don't disagree. Those guys are farmers. They need to farm, but there's a certain zone of protection. It has to be the no-fly zone, so to speak. Is,
Exactly.
you know, if your chemicals are running off the hill that you're not supposed to be putting in the well, we got a problem. So, and I 100% still stand behind protecting that well in itself.
Karen?
I'm very interested in finding out what we can put the restrictions on if we have to grandfather some things and if people have already been there. And I think it would be very important for us to be able to know exactly what we can say no to and what is also what we have to allow. And another point to make sure that how are we monitoring what really is being done on the non-restricted but restricted zones as it goes away from the cone of influence. I think that's an important issue to think about as the town and to understand, is it just on your honor or, you know, yes, farmers do need to farm, but, you know, are they using the correct chemicals?
Or perhaps go towards organic.
Yeah.
Okay, anybody else have any questions? Carolyn?
Yes, my name is Carolyn Waterman, and I actually live in
in the southern part of the town, towards Markville. So I understand that the initial, concern now is for this zone, this wellhead that serves Fairhaven and the surrounding district. But my question is more about the other areas of the town of Sterling. So the land use regulations have a map that show the major aquifers in the town of Sterling, and there are many unconsolidated aquifers in the southern part of the town of Sterling that are used for private wells by landowners. And my question is, as a member of the town board of Sterling, what would you consider doing to plan and protect all of the water in the town of Sterling? Not just this wellhead, not just this little overlay zone, but the water supply for all of the residents of the town of Sterling to make sure that our water is safe and plentiful in the future. One thing that came immediately to my mind was several years ago, there was a proposal for a sand and gravel mine outside of the little hamlet of Markville that could have very adversely impacted one of the major unconsolidated aquifers in the southern part of the town. So, what will you do in the future to protect all of the town's water, not just this wellhead? I'll let you guys pick who goes first and what the response is. Thank you.
If I could start, I have a question for you. What stopped the gravel bed from going in that did protect the water?
Residents going forward with a legal action against the town. So the members, some of the boards of the town had actually approved temporarily the request had actually approved it. And it was the direct interaction of residents in the area that put a stop to it, and there was a legal action as a result of it afterwards.
So if I may, it sounds to me, not knowing, just knowing what you told me, it sounds again like that relationship between the board and that trust and that communication is huge. You need people that will look into it, or that will research how that would be negative, how that would impact, and to speak for you at the board, for the board, to the board. As someone who lives on a well herself, because Old State Road, we don't have the water yet. Our well water is important, and if the aquifer was to become contaminated, we would be, in trouble. And I guess that takes, almost like Charlie said, you only knew if there was a water leak when somebody reported it. So without good communication and people working together, things wouldn't be stopped. So I would think that needs to be the main thing. I wouldn't have known anything about that if you hadn't said, if you hadn't said that. So I think it comes down to, trust, communication, and working together.
So let me rephrase my question a little bit differently.
Okay.
As a member of the town board, would you also look into not just protection of the current wellhead and the recharge area? Would you also investigate the water of the entire town to make sure that there are the appropriate regulations and restrictions in place to protect it for all future as much as possible?
Absolutely. And if that hasn't been done, then the big question would be why. So it certainly would need to be done, yes.
I'd have to piggyback on that and say, why is a good question, but how is a better question. How are we gonna go to each individual landowner? I mean, I'm not saying it can't be done, don't get me wrong, but we're talking everyone's well, right? So if your well is on an aquifer, I'm 300 yards down the road, some of your aquifer leaches into my dug well, you're gonna have to go to every person, you're gonna start a chain reaction. So every homeowner in Sterling, this is just my opinion, my own, is gonna have to answer to whoever's water they're getting it from. See what I'm saying? I believe in protecting the drinking water at the utmost, right? And I'm gonna protect my well to the best of my ability, because I use that water out of my well. I don't know what Bob's doing down the road and things like that. I think to me, that would fall under more of a state or county regulation. I'm not passing the buck, but I'm saying a town could drive itself crazy, going to every one of our residents and trying to solve that problem. Right now, I'm more focused on our water, drinking water, and what we're doing right now. So I'd have to give some more thought into that before I would commit to saying yes to that. Just giving you an honest answer. I think it's really goes way deep and a lot of resources. But you know, if I saw somebody doing something really goofy on their land, dumping used motor oil and stuff, absolutely, I'd be on the phone with DEC. You know, first, if I couldn't address it, but I'd be saying, you know, you can't be doing that. But that'd be a big undertaking to take out everybody's well. And I agree, we need to protect all the water, absolutely.
That would be huge. I'm watching what we're doing with just something that's very confined to village wells, and I'm not seeing 100% agreement on saying we need to protect that.
What about protecting known aquifers? So land use regulations already has a map of unconsolidated
Right.
aquifers.
Would I be in favor of that? Yes, Carolyn, but I'd be real cautious about making it sound like, oh yeah, that's just what I can make happen. And it's gonna depend on your verbalizing your concern with that. Do others have a similar concern? It almost sounds like a survey would be done to get a sense of that. Meanwhile, is it, and I'm gonna just throw this out, would Martville have an interest in having a municipal water? In other words, a water district. And that, I would think, might be an option, but again, I don't know. This is what, how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time? And this seems to be big, just trying to deal with the village wells that we have right here. But do we need to look at all the water in all of the town? Yes, I agree with you. Just watching what's going on in our country right now, and I've always loved this area and had an appreciation for the water. And now seeing parts of our state, you mentioned about Lake Mead and what's going on in our country with water shortages, restrictions. I was just in Denver, Colorado. They're still building houses, and I'm going, where are they going to get the water from? I mean, do they have a perception that it's an infinite supply there? And it's not, if you pay attention to what's going on in the Rockies and the snow and melt and all that. But anyway, we need to protect what we have right here. So I'm thinking in terms of if outsiders want to come in and take our water from us, we need to make it so it's our water, we protect it,
Karen?
I think that's a great step. I think it's down the line, and I think having the water commission and the moratorium that we have protecting this big thing, I think that is just going to happen sooner or later. Do I want it to happen sooner? Yes. Is the discourse of us just protecting the water that we have already happening? Yes, it is. I do think, though, that we do need to do that. We do need to be able to have that. Maybe that could be some survey that could happen throughout the line. We do need to continue. I know people who have wells and they plow their snow on top, hoping that when it melts, there's more water into their wells. That's an important thing. A lot of people run out of their well water. We need to be able to monitor it and make sure that nothing's not getting seeped into those. So it's a huge task, but it does need to happen, yes, I believe so.
And I'm going to intrude again because I just think we have something to offer as Sterling Water Stewards to this. And that is that it has been from the beginning our goal for better protections townwide. And one thing we specifically are calling for is tightening of the special use permit law. Because when a bunch of us first became concerned about all of this last summer and started looking into everything, we looked at special use permit laws that other jurisdictions had. And so that special use permit law is for bulk water, commercial bulk water extraction. And it's townwide. It applies to every aquifer area. And so that needs to be tightened with specific quantitative limits. We looked at other jurisdictions, and they had much more tightly written special use permit laws. So that is a specific that Sterling Water Stewards is calling for now, that in addition to getting the source water protection overlay zone, that would prohibit new bulk water commercial extraction, because there are some folks already doing some, and it doesn't seem to be hurting anything. And we grandfather in existing uses, and we prohibit anything that could contaminate the water supply, and we no more bulk water extraction in the area of the wells, in the recharge area of the well. So that's what they say they're all for. But our second platform is tighten that special use permit law. And it wouldn't protect you necessarily from contamination, but it protects you from somebody coming in, buying the land next door, and saying, I'm building a bottling plant here, and I'm gonna dig here. And so if we specifically say you can only take but so much water out in the town of Sterling, because we want to protect everybody's wells. So we can tighten up that special use permit law. We haven't got enough information out, we haven't researched it enough, but one of our goals is to get more specifics on that. What would we specifically recommend? And so we already have that. We have asked, would you look at the special use permit law? Would you look at ways to tighten it up? Because the reality is folks, if somebody's impacting their well water, they've got to get a lawyer and a hydrologist to begin to fight it in court, and they can't afford it. And so it really is up to the town to help. Because these pressures are coming, they're not going to go away. You know, this piece of land that happens to be next to the public wells, well, that's one thing, but it's all over town that there's beautiful aquifers. And personally, I mean, and then I'll be quiet, I think when they came out with that 2016 map of the aquifers, I think people are looking at that. Isn't that convenient? That they can look at that and figure out what land they might want to buy. Right next to those beautiful pure spring water. So. And who else has a question?
Thank you all for your answers.
Well,
First
thank
of
you
all, I
for your questions.
appreciate your
Very good.
presence here and your willingness to answer and speak to us tonight. So thank you all very much.
Yes.
Ken Engelman. One question. You talked a lot about the hydrology study and Steve Winkley. You know, does he need help? Does he need an assistant? Are there goals in place for him to get his reports issued? I heard someone mention a concern about that reports have to get issued. I'll just ask the Water Steward Committee, maybe you know, but just a concern. You know, we've got all our eggs in one basket with him, it sounds like, and I don't know. But any feedback on that?
Well, New York Rural Water Association is an organization that is funded to provide hydrogeology expertise to rural jurisdictions. And so they're pretty much the only game in town for the likes of us, right? So that's who we use. And what they do is they provide hydrogeology, but they also provide recommendations on legislation. And so when Winkley was brought in the 2015-2016 timeframe at the town of Sterling, actually, if you look and listen carefully, when he has presented, you will hear him say that at that time, they didn't want to do a restricted zone. And he also thought that our aquifer was very difficult to define, there wasn't enough information. And so he recommended that they go with the existing special use permit law. And one of the reasons was that it would protect all of the aquifers that he had just mentioned. And it would be a town-wide thing. And so, get that, you know, he is the scientist, but he also recommends the legal solutions and helps write them. And I think what is often missed is that he'll write you a more restrictive law. You have to tell him we've got the political will to do it. And he has said when the village had him on, in June, I think it was, he said, oh, maybe we should be looking at that for Fairhaven. I've written many of those such in Sterling. I've written many of those such. So that's first, who he is and what he does. Secondly, right now, they are beginning a watershed protection type plan, similar to what happened in Owasco Lake has just completed that. So that's a whole other type of planning process, and it's very good, because the thing about those plans is theoretically it would be the only way that the town of the village of Fairhaven, which is, you know, they're the ones who own our wells, would have any legal way to reach into the town of Sterling should anything happen to the water. And the reason is that particular program is under the Department of Health. And the deal is that when you get those plans done, then you file them with Albany. And once that plan is accepted, then they're gonna come in and save us if anything happens. So we want that, but it's long and complicated, but bottom line is, it's gonna take 2 or 3 years to get that plan. And we're just starting now. So it's not gonna help us when the moratorium is lifted. And the second big problem is, the Department of Health has never really, the Scanny Atlas has the only plan that's been accepted by them. Owasco has finished a plan, and there's a resolution to demand that the Department of Health clarify its procedures for getting these things accepted by the state. So there's a lot of red tape around it. It's not going to save us soon. And Winkley is now working on that. That said, though, if there was a political will, and if he were asked by the town of Sterling to help them do this source water protection zone, he's the guy. He could do it. But it needs to be done in the next year, not in 2 or 3 years. So it's complicated, but that's what's going on, as I understand it. And we have Fairhaven officials here who could correct me. Did what I say make sense? Is it correct?
We're started that process. Thank you.
So other questions?
Can I just share something? I don't know if it was mentioned, and if it, I'm sorry if I missed it, but Charlie Cruel is the chair of a 6-member committee that was newly formed by the town of Sterling, town board, town of Sterling. And it's Charlie Cruel, Lee Shortslip, which are 2 Sterling Town board members, Walter Kraling, village trustee, Village of Fairhaven trustee, as well as 3 citizens, Susan Gately, Cheryl House, and Patrick Guerin. And it's an advisory committee, but they're meeting and trying to collect information, and correct me if I'm wrong, but to report back to the Sterling Town Board the findings as they're pulling the information together.
Well, to some extent, we're transparent. I guess we're not really providing information. We've just been a group to try to gather, number one, historical information. There's been a lot of work that's already been done in that area. Anybody ever heard of Stearns and Weller? Yep, they've done a bunch of work there. We spent a lot of time and money just kind of navigating around what needs to be done. So, our group was put together to kind of draw all these moving targets together and get all this information in one pile. There's a lot of good work that's been done by a lot of different people, but it's been kind of an uphill battle trying to get this information here and this information there. Like I say, we need to pull it all together. And we are working with Steve Winkley, and a big part of this to kind of put the nail in the coffin is going to be this test well that we're going to do, so we can truly see, take our time and gather all this information. 50 years ago, whatever, technology didn't exist to gain when the village wells were originally put in. I just threw a number out there 50 years ago, don't shoot me. I don't know exact time when, but I think you get the gist of what I'm saying. Now things have changed a lot. They actually have underground sonar that can read on what's going on underground. Now we get the cooperation of people's wells in the area. We can see what's going on, see how fast it regenerates. Get all these people in the same room. I don't think that's been done yet. That's what our goal is to do. Making sure everybody's in the right position. So we do this. We only do it once now. We're not going to do it and have this conversation in 15, 20 years. I hope my grandkids and my kids don't have to. But it'd be nice to round all this up and get it done. And then we can say for sure. We may not exactly know how much water's there, but by God, we ought to be able to tell how to protect it and in the area around that. And that's part of our goal is just a committee. I won't call it a committee. We're just a bunch of rednecks getting together and trying to solve this issue. And that's all it is.
And I'm just gonna add that Sterling Water Stewards has hydrogeologists that we have engaged. We said, because we do believe it's healthy to have a second set of eyes of expertise. And we do have the problem that we have not been invited to be on the commission. But it's not an insurmountable problem. And as this planning process goes forward, when New York Rural Water starts meeting and going through this 2 to 3 year planning process, we are hopeful that Sterling Water Stewards will be at the table. But that is why we have consulting hydrogeologists. And as we do lob in some technical information for the consideration of public officials, haven't seen a lot of results so far, but it's an ongoing dialogue, and that will be continuing. So, other questions?
Karen, years ago when I was on the village board, one of my concerns was the trailer park that sits above where the wells are. And I'm just concerned about the migration of the septic systems that go right down to the well. And I was told, I was fairly new on the board, and I was told that Cayuga County was in charge of tracking this migration. When is the last time Cayuga County checked over there? I mean, you're talking about expanding it out, all these overlays and everything. Right next to the wells, you got septic systems, the waste checker. Prove me wrong. Another thing, over just about where the intersection of Short Truck Road and Route 38, where Bill Loftus used to live, there's a pond. Bill says can be dry as anything. That water is just coming up out of the ground. Mert Mahaney's got a place over on Cosgrove Road. It was a little honey well for him because he was supplying water to people that had run out. Easter Curtis, Carl Mahaney, Mert's father, used to tell about how Easter Curtis was pissed off because Carl got that spring and he didn't. And he wanted to have water for the Sterling Co-op. That never goes dry. What would prevent somebody from, say, going over and making Mert an offer, or the house where Bill's office is, which is south of where our wells are, and in this area, water migrates towards Lake Ontario. So what if they were to go off and put exploratory wells there and say, hey, this is the same stuff that we're fighting for over here? How far away from our springs is this gonna be? Now, Carolyn mentioned the whole town of Sterling. I agree.
The same area that was anticipated for that sand and gravel line, there is a well there, that for years and years and years, a private individual used that well to haul water. He couldn't run it dry.
Yeah.
So, with that
I think it's
knowledge,
all on that same vein of water that I heard years ago,
and it's
ran from Skanatlas Lake towards Lake Ontario, and we're on that.
And it's an aquifer, so as Karen said, it's an aquifer on the town of Sterling map, so anybody that buys that property is gonna look and say, there's a good well there. Special use permits should help
When is the
manage
last
it, but I
time
don't know if we
that septic system over there has been checked by the Cuba County Board of Health? And those are the ones that I was told was checking that migration.
I know there is a report, in the document section of our website that we got, and it's specifically about the trailer park.
Mhm.
It's a specific study of how the trailer park impacts the well. So, I offered that, I regret it. And, I have no idea the answer to your question, whose checks was.
We have a well on our property that supplies the Martville, milk station for years.
So, any other questions? Come on, this is your chance. Okay, I'm gonna ask a question. I'm so glad that you all brought up the tone and the problems when you go to a town of Sterling meeting. Because the big overarching problem is that they seem to be making decisions before, they never discuss anything in front of the public. And they mumble if they do say anything, so we can't hear what they're saying, but you get the definite opinion that decisions have already been made. Because they come in and they vote on stuff with no discussion. And so, Charlie, I hate to put you on the spot, but you're the board member. Could you,
I'm having a new board member.
I realize that, and I respect you, but as a board member, you know more than the rest of us. Why is that? Why does, including you, why does nobody speak up? Why do they not ever discuss issues in front of the public? And why is it just, well, let's vote, and the votes are taken, and they move on?
Could you be a little more specific on an issue that was never discussed and voted upon?
Well, I have been attending board meetings only since I got vaccinated, which is another thing. I would hope that you would soon, as the village did, because we got involved with the village last November, December, and were able to make a great deal of progress with the village board because we could zoom in. And most of us who are working this, we're retired, we're older people. So it wasn't until April I came. So my observation, and I think most of us, April, May, June, July meetings,
I didn't see any issues discussed, pretty much. I just didn't hear discussion. We've been talking about the water all this time, and I didn't hear anybody say, no matter what was put at them, they didn't discuss the issue, and the votes were just taken.
Yeah, there was one board meeting that I went to, by the end of the meeting, nobody knew what the board had voted on for the moratorium. And it wasn't until we read it in the paper that we really knew that the moratorium had held. And that the moratorium had been passed, the year moratorium. Because I left with 5 people and we were all going, so did they vote? What was the vote? Did we get the moratorium? And it wasn't until we read it in the paper that we knew we'd gotten a year moratorium.
Okay, we're talking about the one we have to redo? The moratorium, okay.
Yeah.
The first one I voted down. I voted against it. I was the only one on the board to vote against it.
No, I understand that. It's just that nobody understood what you guys were talking about. And I know it, I said it at least 3 times, could you guys please speak up?
Okay.
Because I looked like I was about the youngest person there. And I'm in my 50s.
See, this is why you need an English teacher on the board to help them with their enunciation and being able to be heard.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. I sit at a table much like this. I have a hard time hearing. I just want to reach around and go, speak up. But, you know, it's not my place. But we will definitely address that with, you know, maybe a microphone. I mean, the acoustics in the buildings really stink. It's for, you know, the building, especially town barn's not set up, it's a town barn.
Yeah.
And it's concrete, it serves its function, but yeah, no, I do 100% agree, the acoustics need to be better throughout the room. Those systems aren't that expensive.
But they're all just muttering. It's not that they don't.
Well, I want to hear them mutter louder, so I can interpret. I'm with you, I struggle sometimes too, I'm not innocent either. Sometimes I mumble off, ask my wife.
Well, I also think that maybe Sterling might need to take a note from Fairhaven having an agenda meeting. I think that's a very important thing, that even though it's one more meeting, and yes, that makes just one more night, but it's something that's important because